Love it.
So listen, your first tag match together with Owen is against the New Age Outlaws. It happens on January 11th on Raw is War from Houston. You defeat them, and that makes you guys in your first time teaming together number one contenders for the tag straps. Now that sounds like a cool deal until you realize, well, tag team wrestling was not exactly priority for the WWF in this era. I've kind of thought over the years, I know they had a hot period, we'll call it the late 80s and the very early 90s, where it felt like they were just loaded with great tag teams, like the Rockers, like the Hart Foundation, like the Bulldogs, like Demolition, like the Road Warriors or the Legion of Doom as they were known. I mean, but even more fun acts like the Bushwhackers. And I mean, there were so many great tag teams through the years, but then it felt like for a long time, it just wasn't a priority. Do you think that was because during the lull or the downtime of the WWF, because the new generation area were really some lean times? Or do you think that was just a cost cutting measure for Vince, or was he just not a fan of tag team wrestling?
I don't think the vision that he started with, and I'm going to say when he went national, it was about creating IP. And you know, boy, this has been such a topic of discussion through the years. Um, you know, and I don't want to say in creative rooms, but just kind of in wrestling business discussions, you know, because when you drill down what the industry is, it's truly creating IP and getting a return on that investment. And how much you gonna not just pay the talent, but the television time, the resources, just everything that goes with, because we're all IP chess pieces, if you will. And I think the original vision of the WWF was, let's start with Hulk, and you know, it was, oh gosh, you know, the main events every year on Mania, but you can just kind of look at the end of the day, it was about creating at the very top the brand WWF, but creating the return on the investment for Hulk Hogan. Probably WrestleMania 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I know he did movies on that. But when you transition, anyway, his Vince's single focus, and I say single in that was his very narrow, was building the IP in singles. And when you build a tag, I think a lot of times he said, okay, that's double the expense in payoffs, in flights, in maybe hotel rooms, and however you monetize, it just goes across the board. So I don't think that he didn't like tags. I think that he and other promoters like I can't say that my father always said the most money that he ever drew in tag teams through the years is when he teamed Lawler and Dundee up, two singles, and brought together over a personal issue and made money. Now you know, he was a part of creating the Fabulous Ones, the Rock and Roll Express, and countless others. He loved tag team wrestling and he liked creating tag teams. But I think as promoters and mindsets in the industry is, okay, let's create this single and then create another single and create another single. And if you have 10 singles, you may have a better ROI than if you created, we'll call it 4 singles and 3 tags, if you will. Anyhow, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense to you, Conrad. It's a fascinating discussion, because when you look in the ebb and flow of tag team wrestling, once the business got out of the territories, it is very up and down. I mean, we're about to come into a period in 1999. The Dudleys, the Hardys, Edge and Christian, you know, we kind of have had a resurgence. And in TNA, the same thing. Went ebbs and flows. Motor City Machine Guns, Beer Money, Team 3D, America's Most Wanted, Triple X. It would be kind of up and down as well. So can't say that it's cyclical, but it is unique to kind of go back as a historian and look at it through those lens.
Let's also talk about, you know, the reason some of the craziness is happening here in the company is because Vince Russo has, for lack of a better word, the hot hand.
Mm-hmm.
He's been on quite a tear creatively. That combination of Russo and McMahon seems to have really started to work. I mean, back in April of 98, it's the first time Raw would beat Nitro. Here we are several months later, and man, it feels like the WWF is starting to pull away. What was your relationship like in this era with Vince Russo? Because I know later in the year, when he leaves for greener pastures with WCW, you're not far behind him. In early 99, were you guys tight, or what was that relationship like?
Yeah, I mean, we always so Double J created, for all intents and purposes, in the summer, fall of 93. So 94, when I got up there, Vince Russo, he was not a part of the creative team. I don't know what that department was called, but it was marketing probably, because he wrote the magazine, or one of the writers for the magazine. I think he did other things, but that was his main kind of mindset. And in White Plains, New York, at a TV taping, he introduced himself to me and said, "Hey, I would like to do a story on the character Double J and kind of give some depth and all this." And I said, "Absolutely, I'm all about it." And I think I've told this story a couple of different times. A lot of talent through the years, and I'm not saying at the WWF. I'm talking about even in the USWA. And I'm going to take you, boy, you talk about a story behind the story. Have I told you the story about Cowan, Tennessee, Conrad? Does this ring?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Cowan, Tennessee is a little bitty town at the bottom of Mont Eagle. And so it's kind of on the fringes back in those days of our ABC affiliate, WKRN, that had our local wrestling on. And we would run Cowan, I think 2 or 3 times a year, something along those lines. But we ran a show somewhat close to Cowan, and I knew Cowan was like in 2 months. And my grandmother said, "Hey, the newspaper writer is going to be there, but he wants to talk to you about, because he wants to do a piece to promote Cowan." And I'm like, "Okay." And I can remember her at this spot show that was before Cowan coming up. She pulled me aside and she said, "I want you to look out here in this arena, or high school gym, not arena." And she said, I want you to hear something real good." And I'm like, "Okay." She said, "Do you know who's probably one of the most important people in the building is?" And I'm like, "No, Teeny, I don't." She pointed over at the guy there, and I said, "Who's that?" She said, "He's going to write a story, and that story is going to do more for Cowan than our TV is, because not everybody can watch it. But in this town, everybody reads the paper, and it is going to help us sell a lot of tickets. So you be kind to him." And she would tell me many times, "Don't argue about wrestling, religion, or politics." But she taught me the ropes of that. And my dad obviously would as well. But I gave that guy an interview, but it always stuck with me. And I don't know how many local interviews I've done through the years, either local radio or local newspaper interviews. But having that mindset brought me into early 94, when Vince Russo said, "Hey, I'd like to put you in the magazine." And as I learned, some of the guys never had time for him, or didn't want to sit down with him, or, it was just, "Hey, I'll do the bigger stuff," if you will. That's what started our relationship. And then, we were friends and colleagues throughout the years, kept on. And I think you're asking about 98 and 99. Yes, we were friends. I can tell you, during the Attitude Era, um, what a wild deal. He was pitching ideas and coming off of the Survivor Series, when the evil McMahon character was created, and Austin was red hot, and then Rock and Taker and DX. It was just rocking and rolling. So Vince had his hands full, but yeah, we were good buds during this time.
We should also mention that although you're tagging with Owen on TV, you're still working singles on house shows. I found in my research that you were working with Goldust a lot on the road here in a singles capacity. And that made me wonder, why do you think that is? Was it simply because those cards had already been promoted and advertised, and it was just easier to deliver on that? We're trying to stretch. I mean, I'm really legitimately curious why there was a disconnect from what we're seeing on TV to then what we see at the live events.
If I remember correctly, and you may do better than this, but Jim Ross booked the house shows,
Yes.
and probably Bruce was involved that as well. But as the Attitude Era began to blossom, if you will, I can't say there was a disconnect, but there was, because Jim Ross had to get his cards maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks in advance and get them out. And when those cards, it morphed into a little bit different, that the cards would be, you would put talent who's on the show and book the card as it got closer, because the evolution of the product knew that, I'm sure when JR had the deadline that, okay, Minneapolis or Topeka or whatever live event needs the card, Jarrett and Owen being put together might not have even been thought of. So we had done, I don't know what pay-per-view it was, but me and Dustin Goldust had worked a pay-per-view and stuff like that. So a lot of times, whatever the pay-per-view card was that month, JR would basically book rematches out into the town, because he knew those matches had been given TV time.
Let's also talk a little bit about Deborah. She's sort of going to round out the duo. We've talked a little bit about your relationship with Deborah before, and how maybe that all changed when in real life she started hanging out with Steve Austin. But what was Deborah's relationship with Owen like? We haven't spent much time talking about that here on the show.
Because, and we have, for folks that might not have caught one of those episodes, the Four Horsemen set of circumstances with Bongo, and we did that, I'll call it kind of quasi storyline in WCW. And then, I show up to TV one day and Russo's like, all right, Deborah's going to walk to the ring with you. Okay. And then if you're watching on My World with YouTube right now, if you see that outfit, Owen got that outfit to match my silver and black and red. So we actually did have some matching tights at one time. But Owen had a very professional relationship with Deborah. But again, this is a unique time in the industry, in that it was shock TV in so many ways. And Owen was, I can't say super vocal, but he was vocal enough that he didn't agree with everything. He certainly, his father's promotion didn't book any of that type stuff. And so he was a believer in that, okay, man, this is not traditional professional wrestling. And WWF and Russo or McMahon or whoever else, their counter that was, exactly, it's not. That's why we're doing it.